All right, chat, we need to hurry a little bit because it's almost 4 p.m. and we still want to get through the deck doctor. All right, how it worked this time around with the deck doctor is subscribers were able to submit deck lists via Google Forms. And with the help of Skrelpling, I have sorted them and I have selected a bunch that we're going to look at today. And I made sure to include most of the meta decks so that you can get an opinion on any of the meta decks one by one. And also I decided to include some more rogue-ish strategies. I tried to keep it balanced because I didn't want to talk about some super off-the-wall stuff that I don't even have an opinion on. I'm just going to go top to bottom. There's a couple of interesting things here and there. We're going to start with a Plunder Runic submission. Now, it was anonymous this time around, so I don't know who submitted this, but whoever you are, I gave an additional input field where they could say something about the deck, and they said kaiju go brr. That was their additional input, which I was more hoping for additional input like, hey, I'm trying to bring this to a YCS, or I'm not playing this card because I don't have it, but they said kaiju go brr. Okay, so this is the Runic Plunder deck that they submitted, and I actually do have some opinions on this deck because I did try it this past weekend. Yesterday, I played a couple of games with Runic Plunder because I wanted to see how it functions, and I do think it is a solid deck. I like this list overall. There's a few things I don't like about this list. The first thing I don't love is Kaiju Slumber. I tested this deck and I felt like Kaiju Slumber was kind of an awkward card. I think giving your opponent the attribute that you want them to have is neat, but still overall, I didn't feel like that was that valuable in order for me to play a card like Kaiju Slumber. I didn't like it that much. Kaijus themselves are okay, I think. Rivalry of the Warlords, you could also argue, is a very win more card. Like, it doesn't help you at all when you go second. Going first, it's good, but only if you can already pull off the full combo. And honestly, my experience with this deck was when I pull off the full combo, like, I get to Jord, I get to give my opponent a token. I feel like in most matchups, the Runic Plunder deck itself just wins the game. Even without Rivalry, I felt like that. I think the Rivalries and the Slumbers are very, very interchangeable for other non-engine cards. I think Terraforming is a beautiful inclusion. That is something that, I mean, maybe you have it from my stream as well, because I recommended that in the past, because I think being able to Terraforming for Fountain or Terraforming for Shipyard is pretty valuable, because if you Terraforming for Fountain, you cannot get like impermed on Hugin. You will always find your Fountain, and I think that's pretty good. But depending on the hand, if you already have your Plunders, you can just find a Fountain. You don't have to discard for Hugin, or you just find the Shipyard and you find your tuners, because that's really the most important part. Other than that, I love the Plunder ratios. I think 3 white, 3 golden, 2 blue, 2 black eyes, and 1 red beard is pretty nice. Like, you definitely need 3 of each, and you definitely don't want more than 1 red beard. I think the numbers on these can be changed around a little bit or whatever suits you. Yeah, I would probably switch the Slumbers and the Rivalries for something more generic that is always good, whether you're going first or second, because Slumber is only ever good going second and Rivalry is only ever good going first. I think something like Ash, Talents, Imperm, maybe Books. Those are the type of cards that I like more than these more polarized cards. Why 2 Shipyard? The reason why it's 2 Shipyards is because if you open with 1 or you Terraforming for it, you do want to have another target for Merc, because Merc searches a Plunder spell trap, so you want to make sure you have a search target for that. I think that's pretty neat. You could also play 1 Shipyard and 1 trap, but the trap doesn't give you a starter, right? This is a starter card. The trap is not a starter card. That's my thoughts on the main deck. Overall, pretty solid. To be fair though, it is kind of hard to mess up Runic, right? The side deck here, there's one card that I really like in any sort of Runic deck, probably is like the Grave of the Super Ancient Organism. Maybe Runic Naturia doesn't want it because it has high level synchros, but I think that is a very good card right now against Branded. So you might want to play that. I think it's better than D-Barrier, because honestly, if they Cosmic your Grave, they don't Cosmic your Fountain, and so that's good for you. I think that's reasonable. Also, Grave of the Super Ancient Organism covers some other decks. Like, it's randomly good against Kashtira sometimes, whereas I think Barrier is not that great against Kashtira. It does stop them in some extent, but you can still be annoyed by Fenrir and Unicorn. I don't know. That's my thoughts on Runic Plunder. I think it's a solid deck, actually, in case you were wondering. Doesn't Grave conflict with your big ship? It does conflict with your big ships, but you always have to ask yourself the question, does it maybe hurt my opponent way more than it hurts me? And in this case, it's not even close. Like, Branded does not play. You just have to summon a different ship. You just play with like Blackbeard and Merc, and you don't make the other 2 ships. It's not that bad. I think it's an okay deck. I don't think it's like the crazy Hail Mary solution, but I think it's an okay deck. And I like the list besides the Kaiju Slumbers and the Warlords, I think. All right, next up, we have a little bit of more copium, but I decided to still include it because I didn't want to just have meta decks. I accepted this Tearlaments submission, and they did actually submit some thoughts. Opted for Kaijus as my go second cards because a Rise Heart is the biggest issue. The engine still can do strong pushes otherwise. Kaijus also double as fusion material, and Slumber is good to mill in the opponent's turn. I think what's funny about this is that if you go first, you can trigger your Tearlaments with Slumber and give them a Kaiju, which is randomly strong against Kashtira, right? Just leave them with a Gamma Seal because you slumber your own Merly or some shit. So I guess that kind of works. Like, I'm surprised because I'm looking at this and it's like, it doesn't seem great, but I also can't really call it awful. You know what I mean? I mean, it has like the 3 goods with like Scream, Saliak, and Trivi Karma as targets. You can probably grind decently well with like some amount of Ishizus, King of the Swamp. It's as much as I would like to criticize it, I actually like your build. The main deck, I don't have many changes I would suggest here. I think I would like to play 1 Wraith Soth because that way you can turn your goods or Trivi Karma mill into a Fenrir if you want to. Also, you did forget Poly. I just noticed that. I wonder if that is maybe on purpose because you only want to fuse with King of the Swamp to make Aurora and you're not planning to play Poly. Because there's also no Guardian Chimera. Oh wait, Trivi Karma does not search Wraith Soth. Okay, but the terraforming at least. You probably want Poly. Also, where's Cherubini, dude? Are you not sop to pack, Sleepy Joe? Where's Cherubini? Where's Dracosac Cherubini? No, in all honesty, I don't hate this list. I think it's all right. I surprisingly don't have many suggestions to this because I don't think this is a top tier deck. I think if you're expecting a top tier deck, then this is the wrong place for you. But this does look like it's a fun deck. And I think with the choices you made, I can see this doing okay at like a regionals. I wouldn't think it's unheard of that this can like on a good day, just like, you know, do well at a regionals. I can see it. I don't hate it. I don't hate this list. I think it's a cool approach. And I don't have much for you to change except for the Wraith Soth and maybe the Poly. Also, surprisingly, I didn't think I would ever say this, but isn't this pretty budget now? What's expensive here? Nothing, right? Fenrir 30 each, Planet 20 each, so that's 120 for those 5 cards, and then the rest is not very expensive, I think. So we're talking like a main deck of like 150 to 200. I think maybe it's not budget, but very acceptable. So yeah, solid. I like that submission. I enjoyed that a lot. Next up, we have Mikanko Libromancer. A little bit of madness in here. Although when I picked this out this morning, I was actually pleasantly surprised. This is why I picked this one, because multiple people did submit Mikanko Libromancer. This one feels surprisingly okay to me, because in my mind, Libromancer Mikanko was like this incredible combo pile that couldn't fit non-engine at all, which is kind of true. But in this case, we have like 44 cards with 9 non-engine, which could be better, could be worse, but I think it's okay. They said mostly just trying to make the deck more consistent. High card count, but some one-offs really hurt to open. So I think with Mikanko Libromancer, you've kind of identified the problem, right? The deck is kind of inconsistent, but it also plays a couple of cards that you don't want to see. Like, I think ideally, you don't want to see the Renaud. You don't want to see the Fiery Dance. You don't want to see the Ceremony. You don't even want to really see First Appearance, because then your Geek Boy is significantly worse, because if you draw First Appearance, your Geek Boy doesn't fetch you necessarily anything. The deck really functions well if you don't draw most of these cards. Like, you don't want to see the Intervention, the Agent, the Hair. Like, there's a bunch of cards you don't want to see. So I don't hate going over 40, but then you do face the issue of your non-engine is very far in between, and you still need to make sure you see enough ritual monsters, because here you're not even playing Prosperity, which I find a little odd. Maybe that's a budget reason, but I think the standard combo doesn't really draw any cards. You're not even playing Cross Sheep. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a counter synergy with Prosperity right now. Magician Souls, I guess. Maybe you want Magician Souls, or it's a budget decision, but Prosperity would help consistency. I think Ash and Imperm are fine non-engine in this deck. I'm not sure about Nibiru. I think Nibiru in general, this format is okay. I just think in this particular deck, I'm not sure if you want it, because you're playing 44 cards, so you're not very likely to see the card at all, and you're also not very likely to see it in pairs, which is where Nibiru is really good against Sprite, for example, if you draw it alongside an Impermanence or a Veiler or whatever. In this deck, it's not consistently gonna do that, and there's a lot of other examples too, like for example against the Runic decks, Nibiru is also very nice if you have it paired up with another hand trap, because then you can just like let them make Barone, let them play out their entire turn, nip them at the end, negate the Barone, easy clap. In this deck, when you're drawing Nibiru, you're probably going to draw it alone, which is very, very risky because most people have a way to play around that one Nibiru as the only hand trap. So I would suggest you replace the Nibiru with a more impactful card when drawn alone, which could be something like Lava Golem, but then you're facing issues with the Diviner. I remember seeing some people play Diviner and Lava Golem in the same list. You have to try whether that works out or if it's too awkward. You could try Book of Moon. You could try Evenly Matched. I think all of those are fair. You could also play another hand trap like Gamma. I wouldn't hate, even though that adds driver to the deck. I'm not sure if you need 2 Doom Brokers. I'm not aware of any combo that actually requires 2 Doom Brokers, but if you wanted to save a slot, then you could cut that. Of course, it's a ritual to open, but I think out of all the rituals you play, it's the worst one to open. So why not play like a 3rd Benton or a 3rd Ohime, because those are like probably good. Because you play one, you can get it back with Agent. I think you're okay. That's my input on this deck. I know it's not that much because I haven't played this deck this format yet. I don't think it checks the boxes for what this metagame needs. Like, I don't think this metagame needs like a high ceiling combo pile with just a couple of non-engine. I don't think we're in a format that asks for a deck like that. But I do think except for the couple changes that I suggested, I think this is a solid approach to the deck. Whether you want to play this sort of deck is a whole different question. But if you want to play this deck, I think with some minor tweaks, this approach is fine. All right, next up, we have something a little bit more meta, which a lot of people submitted, which is branded Despia. I just picked one that I liked. There's a few things about this list that I like, a few things that I dislike. I just want to point some of them out. I want to point out Despia in general, I think is very hard to build completely perfectly, but there's also only so much you can really mess up with. I don't think I've ever seen a Despia build in this format where I was like, this is completely garbage. This does not make any sense. Most of the time, they were at least reasonable. I like Allure. I think Allure is a great card right now in Despia. I like that you are pairing it up with a Radion. I think in this case, where you have the added synergy with Allure, you can really deal with the fact that Radion is a level 7, which is normally the downside of playing Radion, is that it's a level 7, so you can't have Kashtira stuck with a Radion. But in case of, you know, playing Allure, I think it's totally reasonable. I like the 3 Albaz because 3 Albaz alongside Cartesia makes sure that you can play through Ash on Branded Fusion, which I think is very, very good to have a plan for when your Branded Fusion gets ashed, because everyone plays Ash right now. So having the Albaz hard draw with a Cartesia Axis card is really, really valuable, because you can still go into your Lubellion or your Albion and play from there. I think that's a very valuable thing, especially with 3 Allure of Darkness. The risk of drawing dead Albazes is not that high. Also, going second, Albaz is actually a pretty good card into the Kashtira board, because if you can bait the Arisard, normal summon Albaz and fuse away the Arisard is a very good line. If you go second against Kashtira, you actually want to draw the card, I think, because it does give you a very good way to play into the board. I don't like Book of Eclipse. I've said it before. I think Book of Eclipse is a card that was pretty good in the beginning of the format and is pretty mediocre now, simply because it's just a worse Book of Moon, I think. It's not a bad card. I just think if you're only playing one book, I think it's Book of Moon. And I'll tell you why, and I'll probably refer to that explanation on some of the future decks that we're going to look at. But the reason why people play books is obviously Kashtira. So we're looking at and evaluating these cards for the Kashtira matchup. And I think going first, we don't have to talk about it. Book of Moon is better because we don't have to book our own things. We don't have to worry about their stuff getting flipped face up and them drawing cards. We just book whatever they summon. That locks them out of every play imaginable outside of hard drawing Kashtira Birth plus normal summon. So Book of Moon going first, very solid card against Kashtira. Book of Eclipse, not so much. Going second, there's a couple of scenarios. Some people go for just a Rise-Heart. In that case, Book of Moon is literally the same as Book of Eclipse, but it cannot get Ash and it doesn't get flipped face up in the end phase. Book of Moon is better against just the Rise-Heart. Then, full Zone Lock. Both of those cards are dead. Doesn't matter. Doesn't make a difference. And then there's this middle combo. At the very beginning of the format, this like 2-card combo to go like Diablosis, Shangri-Ira, or Rise-Heart, lock 3 of your opponent's zone. In that case, Book of Eclipse is better than Book of Moon. The problem is no one does that play, or no one should really do that play, because that play kind of dies to everything. Like that play, if you're playing Kashtira, That play is kind of like the one play that plays into every single out your opponent might play, right? Sphere mode, Lava Golem, Book, Kaiju, every single answer to Kashtira beats that board. So I think if you're playing Kashtira, you need to decide. Either I go full combo or I go like just the Rysard. The middle way doesn't really make sense. And so because Book of Eclipse is only better in that specific case, which no one really should be doing. So this is why I don't really like Book of Eclipse unless you're already playing Book of Moon and you're saying to yourself, I want more of that type of card. I want more books. Then think about playing Book of Eclipse. How about Swords? I think Swords would be a great card, but it sucks going first, and going second, it gets banished by a Rysard. So that card is not very good. Unfortunately, it's just not very good. Other than that, in the main deck, honestly, if you want to keep it 40, I have no other suggestion other than I would take out Branded Expulsion for something else. I don't think that card should be in the main deck. I don't think it's good enough. I don't like Foolish Burial. I think if you want to play another starter, you can play Gold Sarcophagus, because Gold Sarcophagus has the benefit of it works as a tragedy, but it also works as a Mercurier. So I guess Foolish works for Saronier in this particular version because it has the Pistials. In that case, I can get behind it. Yeah, maybe Foolish is fine. You could swap the Expulsion for Gold Sark as well, but then sometimes you draw multiples of Allure into Tragedy, you draw into Sark. It could be worse. I don't know. I think I would just probably do minus Expulsion, minus Book of Eclipses, play 3 Book of Moons, and that's probably a solid list. Or maybe play Ash if you're concerned about the mirror match. That seems pretty nice. If you want to side the Expulsion, you have to put it into the side deck. I'm not sure if I like the Gimmick Puppet in general. I'm gonna be honest, I think if I was playing Branded, I would probably not play it. Maybe that's me in my idealistic world where I don't want to play any Floodgates, but I genuinely think that at the point where you're resolving Gimmick Puppet, it basically means that, first of all, you're resolving Branded Fusion, and your opponent doesn't have any of their side deck cards. Because let's be real, every single side deck card that people are playing against Branded right now stops this card. They're playing Bistials, Ash, Bell, all those cards to stop the Gimmick Puppet lock. It will only ever work if you go first, have Branded Fusion, they don't Ash it, and they also don't draw any other side deck card. And I'm like convinced that Branded wins those games anyways. On top of that, that play is also super weak to some other additional side deck cards. Like, for example, a card like Dimensional Barrier or a card like Grave of the Super Ancient Organism are actually super effective against the Gimmick Puppet lock, because what you can do is just they Gimmick Puppet lock you. You're like, okay, well, set pass. You skipped my turn. Now I'm going to skip your turn. That does not work if you go for the normal Branded opener, because in that normal opener, if you set a Dimensional Barrier, that thing gets Guardian Chimera really fast. Same for Grave of the Super Ancient Organism. So I think overall, the Gimmick Puppet lock, as fancy as it feels and as good as it feels to auto-win with it, I don't think it's correct to play that card. So I think you can just cut the Expulsion, just cut the Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. You can play like a third Bell, whatever, and then your deck is just better than before, I think. You could also think about Crossout. You already have the Aqua Dolphin to make sure that your fusion deployment can counter Ash. I like that. I think that's a neat idea that you can definitely do. I still think Crossout could kind of be a good idea, you know? Like, you could side in a Bell, a Ash when you go first, and then you have Crossout and fusion deployment to counter Ash. I like that idea. Next up, we have Traptrix. I figured I'd include Traptrix, even though I've made my opinion about the deck very clear, which I don't think it sucks, actually. I think it's a valid deck. I just kind of view it as a quote-unquote budget option, which there's nothing wrong with that, but for like actual top tier competition, I'm not sure if I love it. This list in particular, I picked this one because it is pretty streamlined and I like it for that reason, but there's also a couple cards that I was confused when I saw it, so I want to talk about. Like, for example, Enemy Controller, I don't really understand. I don't really see the point of Enemy Controller in this format. I think Enemy Controller is only good in the Kashtira mirror match. You can chain Arachno when they Rysard and then Econ take it, so you still make Zera and Zeus. Okay. I'm not sure at this point. Like, the card is not very good going first, I think. Actually, taking a Fenrir is solid, but for the most part, I'm not convinced by Enemy. Also, I'm pretty sure if you do play Enemy, you probably need your own Rysard, right? Just in case you need to go battle phase evenly them, so you cannot turn their Rysard into a Zeus or something. You'd probably very much want to have your own Rysard in case they triggered Shangri-La or something in standby phase. So you can take it and make a Rysard over it. Evenly, I like. Ash and Imperm, I like. I'm really not convinced by Parallel Exceed. I think that card is a little bit awkward. I don't hate it either, but I felt like another non-engine card would be better than another extender in this deck. If it all resolves, it's a good card, but once again, I feel like we're talking about a card that if I'm already winning, I'm winning even more if I have Parallel Exceed. I think there's not that many scenarios where Parallel Exceed wins me a game that I would otherwise be losing. I think that's what we're trying to look for in like non-engine cards, which Parallel Exceed, while it does summon your monsters, for the most part, it's a non-engine card because it's not what gets you going. It's not what your deck is centered around. I think by definition, that makes it a non-engine card. I'm not gonna lie, besides the 3 Parallel and the 3 enemies, I'm like, that list is 100% fine. Like, I don't know if you need Bottomless Trap Hole, but everything else is good. I think you could maybe argue the Bottomless should be a second Floodgate Trap Hole, but just replace the Parallel Exceed and the enemies with like maybe Book of Moon. Talents seems okay. You could play Kaijus if you think the deck is strong enough going first. Those are like the things you want. Bottomless is for Albaz? Okay, fair enough. Then keep Bottomless. That's a good point. Normal summon Albaz is annoying. Yeah, that's true. All right, next up we have going second Sword Soul. And they said, this list feels so tight. What do I cut? Kick, wait. Okay. I picked this one specifically because it said going second Sword Soul. And I had a lot of questions. I want to try and understand the appeal of going blind second with Sword Soul. Also, I don't really know why there's Dark Hole. By bringing a blind second deck and having like Nibiru in it, you're basically making a statement that, hey, I have no problem with beating a Rise Hard Pass. But then I'm looking at the deck, and I don't think your deck converts that theory into practice. I don't think your deck is very good if they go a Rise Hard Pass. I think you draw a lot of hands with this deck. I think almost none of them will beat a Rise Hard plus Book of Moon plus a Hand Trap or something, which is a very standard opener. Sword Soul breaks boards way better than it's going first turns. Well, yes, but not a Rise Hard, I feel like. I think there's been formats where going second Sword Soul was genuinely a good thing. I've thought about playing it before. I don't know if this is the one, Chief. I don't know if this format is the one where you want to do that. Also, with a Rise Hard and Shangri Era in the format, how are we only on 2 Vishuddhas? If you're looking for things to cut, I think Dark Hole is a good start. I don't think Dark Hole is particularly good because they can all prepare. At least the people that I have been playing have always done the Goliath with Prosperity. Well, they did Garura first, but then Goliath after. That was their second attach. So, risky. Nibiru also risky because I don't think your deck is that good against the Rise Hard Pass situation. Like, your outs are basically Imperm and Dark Hole. None of them work if they have a Lance. So I think you should probably have some amount of like Kaijus in there or something. Maybe Gamma would be a better idea if you're blinding second than Nibiru. Honestly, any deck blinding second this format probably wants Gamma. Gamma is pretty sick. Because you can even top deck into Gamma and still play around the Rise Hard that way. I think if you're looking for cards to cut, it's Dark Hole, it's Nib. It's probably Dragon Circle, because I'm gonna be honest, I don't know why you play 3 Dragon Circles going second. The card is not that good. Yeah, there's no Barone. I just noticed that. I didn't notice that this morning. That is, that has to be a budget choice, right? Which, I can respect that. We always respect that in these deck doctors. When someone says they don't play a card because they don't have it, that's fine. Well, we're not forcing anyone to spend money on a Barone. For a budget deck, you know, if that's your reasoning to play this deck the way you are, if we're measuring it by budget standards, it's probably okay, right? And in that case, I also really understand. Now, in my head, it makes a lot more sense to go second. Because when you go second, you have less need for Barone, right? You can much easier go for, like, yeah, Cheng Ying attack for game. You still want Barone, but you don't need it as desperately than when you're going first, right? This one I included just to please the Rica Sun Avalon enjoyers. Because I'm going to be honest with you, your main deck is literally the incarnation of standard, but I still like it. It's standard for good reason. It's just, I feel like you always play these 31 cards, then you have 9 non-engine slots, and you filled them with Ash, Kaiju evenly, which I think is a very good combination. I like it because these 3 all do different things, and they all work well together. Like, if I Ash Kashtira, they probably don't zone lock me, but they probably still can make Shangri-Era or a Rise Hard. So I can always do something with the Kaiju. Or if I draw Kaiju and evenly, I can evenly them. They leave the Arise Art and then I Kaiju them. Or if they full zone lock, I first Kaiju, then evenly. I think it's a good concept and a good choice of cards. I included this one because I was wondering about this thing. Like, what is going on here? Spiritual Water Art Aoi? That's kind of crazy that you did that. I kind of like the idea, though. I can kind of get behind it. I mean, that card, if this resolves, is a broken card. I mean, those hand disruption cards are banned for a reason, dude. And your deck has a bunch of water monsters. So I think that card is probably pretty good. But yeah, as far as improvements goes, I actually think this deck list is kind of tight. It's a deck that has a very streamlined deck list. I don't think there is too much to be done. I think you could consider playing one more card for going second against Kashtira in your side deck, because currently it's basically only Pankratops, which isn't the worst card actually against Kashtira, because it also does something whatever their opener is, like even against the full zone lock. Well, it technically doesn't let you out any of the zones, but you can kill the Arisard and then maybe play. Isn't there a Rose Whip angle? There could be a Rose Whip angle for going first. But for the most part, I like this list a lot. I just wanted to include it just to give you my opinion on it, basically. You're not getting many suggestions here because I don't have any, but you're getting a well done certificate for submitting the list still. And here we have Naturia Runic, which I felt like I needed to cover because it's a super meta relevant deck. Like I said earlier, I think the deck is also super streamlined. 18 Runics, which you had me right there. You had, if I looked at this list this morning, I saw 18 Runic quick plays. You already know I included this deck. I think the choice of Nibiru plus Gameciel is weird because they don't really function well together. Like, okay, Nibiru doesn't cover a Rise Hard Pass, Gameciel does. But Nibiru's main selling point, I think, is that it stops the full zone lock, and you do have kaijus for that already, so your deck is not auto-losing to it. Unless you're super paranoid about the full zone lock, I'd probably replace the Nibirus with either just more engine and just be like, hey, I have max engine and sometimes I need that kaiju. But I don't know if I like playing just the two of Nib. I think Nib in general in Runic is very good when you go first, actually, because it's very hard to not summon 5 times when you're playing into a Runic board. Or you're just dead, right? If you don't have enough to push, you're just losing the grind game, right? So like backing up your board with a Nibiru is really strong in Runic. But going second, on the flip side, you're also a lot more likely to draw into a dead Nibiru, because you go second, you play, you draw 2 or 3 cards as Fountain, you find a Nibiru, that's stuck in your hand forever. So I have mixed feelings about Nibiru in Naturia Runic. I think a card like Talents is a lot more high value because it can be very good going first when you get hand trap, but it can also be a sick top deck off of Runics. So I would suggest you take out the Nibs for Talents. The rest I like. I don't know if you need 3 blessings. I've seen people see 2, but I also see people run out of them very frequently when they play 2, so that's fine to play 3, I think. I like the 1 goods just to make sure you have more starters of the Naturia tuners. I like that. The side deck, I'm not sure if you want another Nib. I also don't know if Munin is very good. I know your attention with Munin. I understand it. You're trying to like gain 1,000 in time. The problem is if time is called on your first turn, you don't actually get to an end phase. So it's always this like you kind of need to go summon Munin, pass, gain 1,000, and then they still get a turn. Kind of awkward. But yeah, that's my feedback on this one. Besides that, I have no complaints. Besides that, it's a solid list. Here we have a Labyrinth deck profile. They said D-Barrier is not in a main deck. I feel like it's only really valuable against branded, and I'm not seeing a great representation. I agree with you 100%. I played a D-Barrier on Saturday, and I think that card felt like ass. The Ruma Karma Cannon has been insane in testing, both against Kashtira, Sprite, and other rogue matchups that can be troubling to deal with. It feels like the next best normal trap. I agree with you. I played one Daruma Karma Cannon, and I wish I played more. I am in agreement there as well. Solomon Domain. The logic similar to Evenly, it can be fetched by the pots going first. It is always a valuable card, and it could come up against players who are maining evenly matched. I understand that reasoning of wanting some amount of Solomons in your main deck just so you have a chance of beating main deck evenly. I still think it's kind of iffy because going second, it's a problem to draw that card, but it could still be okay. I think your list is solid, and I will also say I think it's better than the list that I played. It's not that much different from the list that I played. I didn't have Lords, I didn't have Solemns, I didn't have Traptrix, I only had 1 cannon. So it's like 6 cards different. So not that much, but I still think the cards that you changed are good changes. Like I like that you took out D-Barrier, I like that you added more Karma Cannons. I think the 2 Heavenly Prisons is also kind of a good number because it's just more starters because it gets you to your traps. I like that. I don't know if this is good enough. I would probably think that maining Solemn Judgment isn't necessary. I understand your reasoning. Like sometimes you can find it with Prosp and be safe from evenly matched, but I honestly think overall against Kashtira, Solemn Judgment isn't that good if they don't have evenly matched. And I don't think there is enough evenly matched in the format to justify playing a main deck out to it, if that makes sense. So I think instead of the Solemn Judgments, I would just play... I don't even know what I would play. Maybe if you like the Ruma Karma Cannon this much, you could try a third copy. I also think that what people in chat are saying right now, I think there is an argument to cut Skill Drain. I personally would cut Skill Drain. I don't know if you feel ready for that, though. I think cutting Skill Drain requires some amount of balls to be like, hey, I think I can win without floodgating at all. That's kind of how I felt like after this weekend. I kind of felt like, hey, I don't think Skill Drain wins me many games that I would have otherwise lost. Because for you to win with Skill Drain, you basically need to be able to set your stuff, resolve the card, and still have some engine to beat them down with. I think that's a scenario where you win with most other trap cards, right? But that's up to you. All right, and here we have Life Twin Sprite. The deck is very easy to build and has a solid plan in drawing non-engine to sack your opponent. I'm just wondering if there's a better non-engine to run in a 250th YTS. Also, if the extra deck can use a change. Okay, we are looking at a list with 12 Life Twins. We have a full Sprite package in the sense that it does have Gamma Burst, but no Double Cross, so it's not full Sprite package. Our non-engine is 3 Ash, 3 Nib, 2 Tactics, 2 Book, 2 Enemy, 3 Imperm. A lot of DOS. I will say I do not like playing 3 Password and 3 Sunny Snitch. I know it feels bad to not draw any Life Twins, but at this point, dude, I think it's just too bad to draw Secret Password and Sunny Snitch together. I think it sucks so much to draw these two together. It's fine to draw like a twin and a Sunny Snitch, or a twin and the Frost, or Frost and Password, or Frost and Snitch. Like all those combinations are fine. The only combination that is so bad is Secret Password and Sunny Snitch. I would really like to mitigate that risk of drawing those two together. Just play like, I don't know, 2 and 2 or 3 and 1, 3 and 2, some lower amount, and just bump some of the non-engine up. I think you are very low on non-engine here, I feel like. You know, you still have a bunch, but for a Sprite deck, it's not that much. You have like 3 Nib, 3 Ash, 3 Imperm, 9 hand traps, and 6 spells. 15 non-engine is like, it's a lot compared to other decks, but for Sprite standards, I think this deck is missing the Prosperity consistency angle. If you could just play less twins and play Prosperity instead, it would be great. You would have to try it though. You are missing the draw on the first turn. I think that sucks, but maybe the added consistency and not having to play that many Life Twins is worth it. Couldn't you just cut the Secret Password and only play the 3 Sunny Snitch? You could, but in that case, I think I'd play 2 Sunny Snitch and 1 Password, just in case if you do draw Password, you thin your deck. I think that's slightly more optimal, just so you don't draw into more Sunny Snitches later when you do go for your draw combos. I know you really need to draw Twin plus Sprite card, but I don't think that means you need to play 12 Life Twins. I think if you're that desperate about not bricking, I would play Prosperity. I don't love the 2, 2, and 2 here, but I assume it's just because you couldn't decide. I honestly am a fan of Talents right now, especially when you pair it with hand traps. Going second against Kashtira, for example, or against most decks, hand traps right now are not turn ending most of the time. Most of the time, you drop a hand trap at your opponent. They still do somewhat of a play, but never like the full combo. And in those scenarios is where Talents is really nice, right? Like if they go for some half-assed combo and end on like a half board, Talents is perfect at taking those boards apart. The same is true for Enemy. Honestly, in this deck, maybe you want 3 Talents, 3 Enemy, no books. That seems like it's also good. And then the extra deck, I'm pretty sure is just fine, as well as the side. I also like your side deck. That's pretty good. All right, next up, we have something a little bit more spicy, but as a fellow Sprite lover, I couldn't exclude it, and I don't want to only include meta decks in this, so here we go. Synchro Sprite is what they submitted. The Agent Earth is a strong synchro enabler for Sprite, as it searches a monster that reborns for itself. I haven't played this list much in practice. I only really theory, but I think it's interesting. Okay, now the idea here is that your normal summon is Agent of Mystery Earth, which grabs the Agent of Life Neptune, which reborns an agent from your graveyard. So 1 Agent of Mystery Earth converts into 2 level 2 monsters, which are also both tuners. And you can play a Rhoda for the card. So what you do is you can go for like Cupid Pitch, make it level 6, make a level 8 into Stardust Synchron or Dragite, make Barone. It's all sorts of crazy. And you have water monsters with the Nimbles for Dragite. It's kind of fire. I'm not gonna lie. This looks very enjoyable. The one problem is that drawing this card is obviously garbage, but you have 6 really good draws. I don't know if you need to play 2 Neptune. I needed a second one for follow-up. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this deck and I think your idea is cool. But then when you look at this deck for a second time, you're like, okay, well, when I pick first with this deck, 3 Kaijus, I don't really want to see Hop Ear Squadron. I don't want to see Nimble Angler. I don't want to see Gamma. I don't want to see Neptune. I don't want to see Driver. And I don't want to see multiples of these. So that's a lot of cards I don't want to draw in a 41 card deck right now. On the flip side, if I'm opening Agent plus blue, that's a pretty nice opener if it's Agent, blue, and some non-engine. But it's kind of the same issue as the Life Twin deck, but with more bricks, you know what I mean? Like, your full combo is pretty pog, right? But you also have 9 normal summons. Like, you have 3 Agent, 3 Sacred Waters, and 3 Beavers. Once again, I don't have much of an improvement. I don't really understand why there's only 2 starters. Other than that, I think it's a cool idea. But that's all. Like, I don't think this is better than other Sprite versions. Starter is a weird draw. It doesn't start the synchro lines. I mean, it's a matter of if you can already play, you can use the starter for later. You can save it. And if you don't, if you can't play yet, you would still much rather have a starter than not being able to play, right? It's less so that I have much improvements for this deck. It's more so I wanted to show it. I wanted to reward the creativity on this one. I wanted to show it off at least, you know, because I think it's a quite cool idea. Unfortunately, Agent of Mystery Earth is not quite an Assault Synchron or a Synchro Sprite just yet. And then we have Melffy Sprite. Melffy Sprite, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm kind of in love with this list. I can already tell whoever submitted that, actually the submission was sub only, but even if it wasn't sub only, I already knew that this person needed to be a sub to the channel. That's a certified subscribed to the channel Sprite list. That is a brother or sister in Christ right here of the channel, for sure. The 40 card Melffy Sprite list, no Droll and Lockbird, I love it. It does have Gamma Burst, which I'm not in love with. But, yeah. The only card I'm not sure about in Sprite right now is Enemy Controller. I think Enemy Controller is... It's good against Rysard, but at the same time, if they don't have a card like Lance or whatever, wouldn't you rather just book it? The same for going first. Wouldn't you rather just book their first Kashtira rather than take it? Are you just supposed to hard open Prosp into the Melffys? No, you go Melffy of the Forest, search Caddy, end phase special Caddy. In your opponent's turn, they summon. You bounce Caddy to add Penny. Use Penny's effect to synchro summon Herald of the Arclight or Merry Melffys on your opponent's turn. That's the beauty of the Melffy engine, is that you don't need to draw them, and you also don't even need to resolve Gigantic to get them, because you have another rank 2 that does it. Which brings me to one more point. You do not play a target for Gigantic Sprite in this deck, which I think can be fine, because you can use Gigantic as hand trap bait, and if it works, you can just get yourself red or carrot in addition. But I still think it would be nice to have an additional target. I tried the Soul Scissors that Dinkang Phum has been using. It was definitely not bad. I didn't hate it, but I'm not sure if it's the best you can get. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that I like more. I like Hyperia, but that conflicts with Prosperity, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not too bad. Maybe you can risk it. I wouldn't hate it. Book of Moon or Imperm is cards you should probably try over Enemy. Everything else I really, really like. Gamma Burst, I'm still not convinced is necessary, but everyone that's testing Gamma Burst always emphasizes how necessary it is, but whenever I play with it, I never need it. But, yeah. How would you side in the Bestials? What do you mean, how? I like Bestials in the side deck because they cover Mathmech and they cover Despia. And I think the more you can fit, the better. Simple as that. And I think they are pretty good in Sprite because they give you bodies for sprint. You mean siding patterns? Going second against Branded, I would side the Bestials for like Melffys, Smashers, and maybe whatever you have in this spot. You could side out some amount of Prosperities going second, because going second, you always have the option to have Mosquito OTKs. So if you activate Prosperity, that option is basically gone. I don't love that. So sometimes going second, since you do see 6 cards, so you are more likely to have a playable hand, I think siding out Prosperity going second is not unreasonable. But I like this list overall. I think it's good. We saved the best for last. I wanted to talk about Kashtira. A little bit at least, right? Hey, we need to include it. I want to give you guys my opinion on some of these tech cards for Kashtira, because I'm sure some of you are going to play Kashtira, and I want to give you guys some insight. The first thing I noticed, and I picked this list because it has some more exotic tech cards. Like, I don't see that many Gamma Seals and Cosmic Cyclones, so I wanted to include this list specifically. Also, what the hell is École des Zones? Isn't this kind of busted against Kashtira? How did they beat this? I didn't know that card. First of all, the first thing I noticed when I looked at this list was that you are not playing Ogre and Preparations, which, in my personal opinion, is a mistake. I personally was very impressed by the performance of Ogre and Preparations in the grind games. That is because my personal approach for the deck is that when I'm playing Kashtira, I would always play it in the very grindy approach. I would try to not play into the huge punishment cards like Sphere Mode, Nibiru, Lava Golem, all that stuff. And I think the Arise Hard control is very, very nice if you play Preparation and Ogre. Also, in some matchups, I think it is good to have the option of going for the full zone lock with some hands in some situations, right? Sometimes you draw a lot of engine, you don't have any non-engine, you're like, I don't think a Rise Hard control is gonna cut it here. So having the option to go for the full combo, I think is good, and you need Ogre for that. So I would advise you to play Ogre and Preparation. Unless you've tested this a lot and you are like, no, Josh is wrong, I never needed Preparation to win the grind games, fair enough. I'm leaning towards I would do it. I think Gamma Seal is a fine card here. Lance, like I said, Lance is kind of iffy because, I mean, just remember all the decks we looked at today. There was a bunch of decks that did play books and whatnot, but there was also a lot of decks that didn't. Especially Sprite is like a deck that now plays a lot of hand traps that beat Lance. Gamma, Ash, you see a lot of kaijus everywhere. So Lance is kind of a gamble card. It does still work on Imperm, so it's overall probably still a good card to use. I just want to say that when I tested Kashtira, I had a couple of hands where Lance was like my only non-engine card, and it didn't cut it because my opponent just started playing normally and they were able to beat like the Arise Hard pass. On the other hand, we are still seeing cards like Enemy Controller, Change of Heart, Book of Moon, Book of Eclipse, Talents. The card is still good. Cosmic, on the other hand, they gave me some reasoning for. The Cosmics I put in because I expect a fair amount of Runic decks in London due to copium reasons. Also, Cosmic doesn't hurt against Labyrinth or Sprite either. Share the pain to out single Arise Hard through lands, Occult the Zone package to have an advantage in the mirror when siding for going. Cosmic Cyclone, I unironically think, is a very underrated card going into YCS London. It's a very versatile card, and I think going first against Kashtira, it is an exceptionally strong card because it hits two of the most powerful cards in the deck, which is the Field Spell and Birth. The amount of extension that they have without these cards is very limited. So having a Cosmic Cyclone going first is very good, I think. While going second, it can still do something, right? Let's say they have a set Forbidden Lands and your hand is Cosmic and Book of Moon. You can just start with Cosmic, they chain lands, and you chain Book to that, so it still works out. The only problem I have with this card is that it doesn't stop anything immediately. It's not a hand trap. It doesn't help with the zone lock. It doesn't out the Arise Hard on its own. It only hits the stuff around it, like the back row. The back row is sometimes a problem, but sometimes it's not. The Arise Hard is always a problem. So Cosmic Cyclone kind of targeting the secondary issue that you're facing is kind of awkward, but I still think if your deck otherwise handles the Arise Hard just fine, you know, like in this deck, you have a couple hand traps, you have kaijus, you have books. I think Cosmic is a good card. Like, I don't think I would play Cosmic in any deck that has like room for 6 non-engine, like Runic. I would never play Cosmic because you just need more impactful stuff. You need stuff that deals with Arise Hard. In a deck that already has a lot of non-engine, I can see Cosmic. I think Cosmic is solid then. I don't know if I would play Cosmic and Lance together because those are both cards that don't really do anything defensively, and they are both not dealing with the monsters, the main problems that the decks are putting out. I don't know if you want 6 cards that just beat the back row. Kind of iffy in my opinion. I think you should decide for either one. The Share the Pain idea I think is not that great. I don't like that idea. Outing a single Arise Hard through lands can be a lot easier than that. Like, that is not a very good idea, I think. I like this idea. That's kind of neat. But the Share the Pain probably should just be, what's it called? Herald of the Abyss? That card is a lot better. That wraps it up. I hope that gave a lot of you a little bit more input on what I think about certain things. In case anyone is wondering how you were able to submit decks, that happens on my Discord. You can go !Discord to join the Discord, which is even a great place outside of the Deck Doctor streams. You know, we have a lot of great discussion going on there. !Discord and join the Discord, and then I will let you know when we do this again, and you can submit a deck list. I've talked a lot. My mouth hurts. Anyways, hey, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Peace out, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.